We've got the dorsal vagal state. And for people who aren't aware, dorsal comes from, I believe, the term dorsal fin, part of marine biology. Yeah, right.
Basically simplified, the backside of that whole bundle of nerves, when there's activation there, that's the part where part of the parasympathetic system that takes autonomic, right, so that you don't have control over, and that then brings this what we would probably call collapse reaction. So that's not a freeze state per se. It's also in a way paralyzing, but without the energy. It's really like there is no muscle tone. You're losing this. People who have been exposed to trauma or traumatic events and carrying trauma very often have that experience. They know exactly that state when there's no more energy, when there's a complete breakdown, when there is dissociation, or when they feel like so overwhelmed that they're becoming a vegetable.
Now, for people who haven't experienced this, though, what does that look like? I mean, from a practical standpoint.
You're saying it this way, James, but I think in my experience, everyone has had similar. We don't have to go into very complex trauma or having to be exposed very traumatic events, although I think every one of us carries some sort of trauma anyway. But we all have experienced moments where we lost all of our jazz, all of our mojo. There was like sometimes shorter, sometimes longer periods of like no energy, and it was really hard. You can't. It's like losing the ground under your feet, right? And I think this is something a lot of people can relate to.
When you're looking at this in a loved one or someone you care about, what does that look like?
It could look like a depressed state where whatever you do as a partner doesn't seem to catch on, and there's this resistance, right? And you're finding yourself, you know this feeling, and you have a friend and you can't get through. You know he or she is suffering, and you can't make your point. You can't be there for that person because the person is not there, right? There is a little presence, or there is this resistance, and it could be very difficult to deal with. It can also look like complete isolation, right? People shut off, they're off the screen. I have a friend where that happens sporadically, and then for weeks I don't hear anything, I don't hear back on messages, and sometimes I'm very concerned what's going on. It can also look like interpersonal conflict, right? People that are not used to, in this state, to voice that in an assertive way. I'm going through such and such, I'm having a bit of a rough patch here, and it's tough, and they can't. And all you get is anger, right? And criticism or blame, and they attack you. There's a fourth way. It could look like they're just meddling through, keeping it up with their work, with their family life, and they seem to be very obedient and functioning, but there's no pleasure, there's no joy, it's bloodless. It's like they're becoming zombies, right? And you're going through that. So these are the four very, very typical expressions that this state can show up and look like.
Now, I want to get into the personal and the inner work on that, but before we do, I think one of the things I've heard a lot of is a sense of helplessness when it comes to looking at that in someone else. How do I help you, or how do I help my husband, or how do I help my friend in a situation like that? Do you have any advice for that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's already quite informative when you can feel into that helplessness, and when you can be aware for yourself to not go into the same loops of interaction. Very often what happens is we're feeling helpless, and somehow that makes us, there's frustration, there is an acting out on this feeling and of this helplessness, and holding this and being able to know, well, I just have no idea how to get through. And that would be my way. What I do with clients is I'm sharing this, and like, it seems like I struggle with getting through to you, and I feel like I want to be there, and to instill this sense of intimacy, this sense of closeness, this sense of care, and to bring that in a tone of voice and in a manner that is not threatening, but also not a blame, right? It's could be quite an art. So we really would look into like how to communicate that in a way that is acceptable for the other person.
So essentially a calm and supportive recognition of what you're seeing.
And an acceptance with that, right? There is helplessness. We can't always help, and just to be with that without going into overdrive.